For 3 years of marriage, Marcus never touched her, yet on the day she discovered her pregnancy, he handed her divorce papers, demanding she make way for the one that got away. She signed with a smile, then turned and walked into the arms of his arch-rival. It wasn't until his wedding to the one that got away that he heard the doctor's pronouncement, "Mr. Marcus, your ex-wife is carrying twins." Grace looked down at the divorce papers in her hand, her fingertips trembling slightly. Not from sadness, but from anger. For 3 years of marriage, Marcus barely touched her, yet last night, for some inexplicable reason, he had returned from the bar and pressed her against him, tormenting her until midnight. Her back still ached, her legs still felt weak, and now, as soon as dawn broke, he was demanding she sign the divorce papers. "Tiffany is back." Marcus stood by the bed, pulling on his shirt, his back straight, his tone as bland as if commenting on the weather. "She doesn't like anyone else by my side." Grace clenched the duvet, her nails digging into her palms. Tiffany. The one that got away, who had married a wealthy businessman overseas, divorced, and now returned with nothing. So, she, the other woman, was expected to meekly step aside. She took a deep breath, and when she looked up, a submissive smile already played on her lips. "Okay, I'll sign." Marcus paused as he buttoned his shirt, seemingly surprised by her readiness. He turned, his deep eyes scrutinizing her face. Grace threw off the duvet and stepped out of bed, her bare feet sinking into the carpet. She walked to the desk and picked up the pen. Her wrist still trembled, a lingering after-effect from when he had pinned her against the desk last night. She wrote her name, stroke by stroke. Grace. After the final stroke, she pushed the papers towards him, her smile gentle. "Mr. Marcus, I wish you and Ms. Tiffany a long and happy life together." Marcus looked at the delicate script of her signature, high. Brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. He had expected her to cry, to make a scene, or at least to ask why. Nothing. Her composure was uncharacteristic. He picked up the papers, his gaze sweeping over her slightly pale face and the faint red marks on her neck. His sapple bobbed. "You'll be amply compensated." Grace nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Marcus." She watched him turn and leave, the bedroom door gently closing behind him. She was left alone in the room. The cold, woody scent of his cologne still lingered in the air, along with the lingering traces of last night's absurdity. Grace walked to the window and watched the black sedan drive away from the Vance, disappearing from her sight. She raised a hand, gently placing it over her lower abdomen. The 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test kit she'd used that morning burned against her palm. The unexpected arrival of this child, and the timing of his decision to divorce, were equally ironic. She took out her phone and dialed a number. The call was quickly answered, and a lazy, magnetic male voice came through. "Mrs. Marcus?" Grace looked at the dazzling, almost blinding sunlight outside the window, a slow smile curving her lips. "Mr. Ethan, is your offer from last time still valid?" Hollingsworth's top-floor CEO office. Ethan put down his phone, his fingertips tapping lightly on the mahogany desk, a flicker of interest in his eyes. His assistant stood by, reporting in a low voice. "Marcus has already received the divorce papers and is proceeding with property division. Ms. Tiffany is currently staying in a VIP suite at the Grand Hotel, which is under Vance." Ethan raised an eyebrow. He certainly couldn't wait another moment. The assistant hesitated. "Mr. Ethan, Ms. Grace is Marcus's ex-wife, after all. Would contacting her now cause unnecessary trouble?" Ethan chuckled softly, then stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing down at the entire city. "Trouble? Trouble is precisely what I enjoy most. Eoli trouble that could inconvenience Marcus. He and Marcus had been rivals for years, from business deals to personal grievances, always at loggerheads. Now, for Tiffany, that manipulative woman, Marcus had personally pushed away Grace, such an excellent pawn. How could he not take advantage? What's more, recalling the calm, almost calculating voice of the woman on the phone, Ethan's interest deepened. Even a cornered rabbit will bite. And was never a docile rabbit. She had merely worn a rabbit's skin. Now, Marcus had personally ripped that skin off. "Go pick up Ms. Grace," Ethan ordered. "Take her directly to Willow Estate." The assistant acknowledged and left. Ethan picked up his jacket and slowly put it on. The real show was just beginning. Grand Hotel Suite. Tiffany stared at the photos sent by her private investigator on her phone, her face ashen. The photos showed Grace leaving the Vance and getting into an unfamiliar luxury car. The car eventually drove into Willow Estate, a renowned top-tier private villa area in the West. It was a place even Marcus might not easily enter. Although the man opening the car door was only captured in a blurry profile, she recognized him. It was Ethan, Marcus's arch-rival. How could Grace be involved with Ethan? And on the very day of her divorce. Her original plan was to force Grace out, smoothly take her place as Mrs. Marcus, and then use the Vance family's resources to help the Lynn family rise again. But if Grace had teamed up with Ethan, was that woman planning revenge? Tiffany's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately dialed Marcus's phone number. Her voice, however, instantly became weak and helpless, tinged with a sob. Marcus. I think I made a mistake. Half an hour later, Marcus rushed to the hotel. Tiffany threw herself into his arms, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted to apologize to Grace. It's because of me, after all, that she had to leave. But she refused to see me, and she even got into Anne's car. Marcus, does she hate me so much? Will she hate you too? Marcus's body stiffened. Ethan. That name made his eyes darken instantly. He gently pushed Tiffany away and took out his phone to call Grace's number. Unable to connect. He dialed again, still the same. Clearly, she had blocked him. Marcus's face was utterly grim. He remembered Grace's overly calm expression when she signed the papers that morning, and her distant, smiling words, Mr. Marcus. It turned out she wasn't without hate, she had simply found a new partner. And it was his most detested rival. He wrapped his arm around Tiffany's trembling shoulders, his voice cold and hard. She won't cause any trouble. Ethan is just toying with her. But, no buts, Marcus cut her off, his tone leaving no room for argument. The wedding next month will proceed as planned. I will make sure everyone knows that you will be the only Mrs. Marcus. Tiffany nestled into his arms, a triumphant smile curving her lips where he couldn't see it. Grace, what if you did get involved with Ethan? Marcus's heart, after all, was still with her. Willow Estate, master bedroom. Grace stood before the large full-length mirror in the walk-in closet, looking at her reflection. She was wearing a custom-tailored dress Ethan had sent for, the size absolutely perfect. The fabric was soft and form-fitting, accentuating her slender waist. Her lower abdomen was still flat, showing no signs of change. Only she knew that 2 tiny lives were growing there. Yes, twins. That was the result confirmed at the private clinic this morning. On the very day she signed her divorce papers, she learned she was pregnant with her ex-husband's children, and 2 of them. Fate had played a cruel joke on her. Does the dress fit? Ethan's deep voice came from behind her. Grace turned, seeing him leaning against the doorframe, holding a glass of warm water, his gaze on her filled with undisguised admiration. It fits perfectly, thank you, Mr. Ethan. Ethan walked closer, handing her the water glass. The doctor said you need plenty of rest, especially during the first 3 months. Grace's fingers paused as she took the glass. He knew she was pregnant? Ethan seemed to read her thoughts and chuckled softly. I had my assistant retrieve your medical report. Don't worry, no one else knows besides me. Including. Grace lowered her gaze, taking a sip of water. The warm liquid soothed her dry throat. Mr. Ethan is very well informed. I'm always very attentive to my partners. Especially partners who were carrying his arch-rival's children. Priceless. What are your plans now? Ethan asked. If you want to keep these children, I'm keeping them. Grace looked up, her gaze resolute. They are my children alone, and they have nothing to do with Marcus. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Even if it means you might face a lot of unnecessary trouble? Trouble never disappears by being avoided, Grace said, setting down the water glass and looking out the window. It only intensifies with weakness. She had been weak for 3 years, and it had earned her a cold set of divorce papers. Enough. Ethan watched her slender yet defiant back, a hint of approval flashing in his eyes. Excellent. So, in return, or rather, as the first step in our cooperation, Grace turned, her gaze calmly meeting his. Can I attend your wedding with Tiffany? Ethan paused slightly, then burst into laughter. Of course. He wanted to see how this cornered rabbit planned to show her claws. Marcus and Tiffany's wedding was undoubtedly the most anticipated event of the month. Major media headlines had been reserved early, and online discussions were constant. A perfect couple, a reunion of long-lost lovers, a testament to enduring love. The press releases were truly moving. The wedding was held at a luxurious beachfront hotel owned by the Vance family. Guests gathered, champagne flutes clinking. In the bridal suite, Tiffany, wearing a priceless custom-tailored wedding gown, looked at her beautiful reflection in the mirror, an undisguised smile of happiness on her lips. Finally, this day had come. From today onwards, she would be the legitimate Mrs. Marcus, the mistress of the city's most prominent high society family. Grace, that stumbling block, had been completely removed. The bride looked stunning, the bridesmaid complimented. Tiffany smiled demurely, raising a hand to adjust her veil. Where's Marcus? Mr. Marcus is greeting some important guests, he'll be here shortly. Before she finished speaking, the suite door opened. Marcus walked in, dressed in a black custom-tailored suit that accentuated his tall, imposing figure and cool, detached aura. However, there was a trace of almost imperceptible fatigue and irritation in his brow. In the past few days, he had mobilized his entire network, yet he still couldn't pinpoint Grace's exact whereabouts. All he knew was that she was well protected by Ethan, living in Willow Estate, keeping a low profile. This feeling of losing control unsettled him deeply. Marcus, Tiffany stood up, smiling as she walked towards him and intimately linked her arm through his. Most of the guests have arrived, shall we go out? Marcus collected his thoughts, his gaze falling on her exquisite face, and nodded. The wedding march began solemnly. A petal shower rained down. Tiffany, arm in arm with Marcus, walked down the flower-strewn red carpet, receiving blessings and envious glances from the guests lining the aisle. Everything was as perfect as a dream. Until she saw someone who absolutely should not have been there among the guests. Grace. She was wearing a sharply tailored pearl-white pantsuit, simple in style but exuding an extraordinary presence, sitting quietly in an aisle seat. Beside her was Ethan, dressed in a dark patterned suit, his posture relaxed yet unmistakably sharp. How could they be here? Tiffany's steps abruptly faltered, her smile instantly freezing. Marcus also saw the two of them, his pupils constricting sharply, his hand unconsciously tightening around Tiffany's arm. The grip was so strong that Tiffany nearly cried out in pain. All eyes in the hall turned to the uninvited guests, and whispers spread like a tide. Ethan seemed oblivious to the scrutinizing, shocked, and amused stares. He leaned slightly towards Grace, saying in a voice loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Darling, it seems we're not very welcome." Grace picked up the champagne flute in front of her, her fingertips gently swirling the liquid. Her gaze calmly swept over the ashen-faced bride and groom, a faint, almost imperceptible curve on her lips. "How can that be?" Her voice was soft, yet it carried an icy clarity. "On the happy occasion of my ex-husband and his dear sister, it's only right for me to present a special gift, isn't it?" The words "a special gift" were like a drop of water splashed into hot oil. The commotion among the guests grew more pronounced. Who didn't know that Marcus had divorced and then hastily remarried his former one that got away? And who didn't know that the poised Grace before them was the divorced ex-wife? Now, the ex-wife, accompanied by his arch-rival, appeared at the wedding venue and even spoke of a special gift. This was clearly intended as crashing the party. Reporters were almost frantic, nearly pressing their camera shutters, eager to shove their lenses into the faces of the four individuals. Marcus's face was so dark it could drip ink. He glared fiercely at Grace, the woman who had been by his side for 3 years, as docile as a wilting flower, but now stood like an ice-cold rose, elegant and thorny. She didn't even look at him, her gaze lightly falling on Tiffany. "Tiffany, you look beautiful today," Grace smiled faintly. "Did personally choose this wedding gown for you? He really likes the designs from this brand. He used to say I couldn't pull off that pure look." Tiffany's face instantly went pale. These words sounded like a compliment, but every word was a dagger. They subtly implied that Tiffany had risen by mimicking purity, and perhaps even that her wedding gown was based on Marcus's leftover preferences for someone else. "Grace, you've misunderstood." Tiffany was on the verge of tears, shrinking behind Marcus, looking utterly victimized. Marcus instinctively shielded her, his sharp gaze shooting towards Grace. "Grace, you are not welcome here. Please leave." Ethan chuckled softly, crossing his long legs, his posture as relaxed as if he were in his own living room. "Mr. Marcus, is that your idea of hospitality? Grace and I came with formal invitations." He paused, then looked meaningfully at Tiffany. Perhaps the bride herself extended the invitation, hoping for a special blessing? Tiffany's heart pounded. She had, in fact, secretly arranged for an invitation to be sent to Ethan, aiming to provoke Grace, make her lose composure in front of Marcus, and ideally cause a scene at the wedding, thereby solidifying her image as a discarded wife and crazy woman. But she had never imagined that Grace would not only come but do so with such composure, such fierce elegance. Nor had she expected Ethan to accompany her so openly, directly turning the tables on her. Grace set down her champagne flute and took a small, exquisitely wrapped velvet box from her clutch bag. "Just a small token of my regard, to wish you both." She paused, her gaze sweeping over Marcus and Tiffany again, her red lips parting slightly. Happy wedding, and may you be locked together forever, and spare the rest of us. Pfft, someone in the guest section couldn't help but laugh out loud. That was truly a malicious blessing. Veins throbbed in Marcus's temples, and he almost squeezed out the words through gritted teeth. Take it away. Marcus, Tiffany gently pulled his arm, forcing a smile and whispering, so many people are here, don't lose your composure. The gift, we'll just accept it. She couldn't let the situation become any more awkward. If they just accepted the gift and sent these two away, the wedding could continue. Just the bitter words of a loser, she could handle it. She motioned for the bridesmaid to take the gift. The bridesmaid nervously stepped forward and took the small box from Grace's hand. Grace took the opportunity to stand up. She was wearing low heels today, but as she straightened, the cut of her tailored pantsuit subtly outlined a slight change in her waistline. Marcus's gaze was fixated on her, especially her abdomen. He remembered that morning, her somewhat slow movements when she got out of bed. He also remembered her overly pale complexion. A preposterous and startling thought suddenly burst into his mind. Could it be? Just then, the hotel lobby doors were thrown open. A doctor in a lab coat, accompanied by two nurses, rushed in, looking harried and anxious, heading straight for the main table where Marcus's parents were seated. Everyone's attention was instantly drawn to them. The doctor didn't even seem to notice the occasion, gasping for breath as he addressed Mrs. Marcus. Mrs. Marcus, we've received Ms. Grace's blood test results. She's pregnant. And with twins. According to the timeline, the children are Mr. Marcus's. Boom. It was as if a thunderclap had exploded through the entire wedding venue. In that instant, silence fell. All eyes, like spotlights, abruptly converged on the bride and groom, whose faces had instantly turned ashen, and then, in unison, swung towards the ex-wife standing by the aisle, her back perfectly straight, a faint, almost imperceptible cold smile playing on her lips. Grace. Tiffany gasped, covering her mouth, her eyes filled with disbelief and terror. Marcus stood frozen, as if under a spell, his mind a blank, only the doctor's earth-shattering words echoing wildly, pregnant. Twins. His children. Dead silence. If before there had only been a surge of whispers, now, the entire wedding venue was frozen in absolute stillness. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone was dumbfounded by this sudden, earth-shattering news. The ex-wife was pregnant, with twins, and it was revealed publicly at the scumbag ex-husband's wedding to the one that got away. This was the most preposterous, most melodramatic plot twist of the year. Even a TV drama wouldn't dare to write a plot like this. Reporters were already frantic, flashbulbs popping one after another, eager to capture every detail of this shocking scandal in high society. Mrs. Marcus abruptly stood up, her face first stunned, then turning to ecstatic joy, and finally becoming incredibly complex due to the current situation. Doctor, are you sure? Her voice trembled. The doctor wiped sweat from his forehead, nodding with certainty. Absolutely. The report is undeniable. Ms. Grace is indeed carrying twins, and by pregnancy week estimation, it was conceived before the divorce. Marcus's bloodline. Now, even the last shred of hope that the children might not be Marcus's was completely extinguished. The children, my children, Marcus murmured, then suddenly looked up, his bloodshot eyes fixated on Grace, as if he wanted to devour her whole. You're pregnant? Why didn't you tell me? Grace met his almost fiery gaze, her expression still that chillingly calm one. She even let out a soft laugh. Tell you? She repeated the words, as if she had heard the greatest joke. Tell you, and then what? Give you a chance to force me to abort them, just to make room for your one that got away, so her future children could exclusively inherit everything from the Vance family? Her voice wasn't loud, but it clearly reached the ears of everyone present. Every word was a stab to his heart. Grace! Marcus roared, his chest heaving violently, his sanity teetering on the brink. Marcus! Tiffany clutched his arm fiercely, her nails almost digging into his flesh, her face completely drained of color, her eyes filled with tears. The wedding isn't finished yet. She could not lose all of this. Absolutely not. Marcus looked at the trembling bride beside him, and then at his ex-wife, cold as ice, carrying his children, a metallic taste rising in his throat. Chaos. Utter chaos. Ethan slowly stood up at this moment, elegantly adjusting his suit cuff, then reached out and, with practiced ease, placed his arm around Grace's shoulder. It was a gesture full of protectiveness and possessiveness. He looked at the ashen-faced Marcus, who resembled a trapped beast, a provocative curve playing on his lips. Mr. Marcus, it seems your wedding needs to be paused for a moment. He paused, then his gaze swept over Tiffany's pale face, his tone filled with undisguised mockery. After all, dealing with the Vance family's bloodline is far more important than marrying an insignificant person, wouldn't you agree? Ethan. Veins throbbed in Marcus's temples, his fists clenched, yearning to charge forward immediately. Ethan, however, no longer looked at him, lowering his head to Grace and saying softly, "The air here isn't good, not suitable for the baby. We should go back." Grace nodded, allowing him to guide her, turning to leave the chaotic, absurd vortex. "Stop." Marcus suddenly threw off Tiffany's hand, stepping forward to block their path. He stared intensely at Grace, his voice hoarse and distorted from extreme suppression. "They're my children. You have to stay." Grace stopped, slowly turning her head. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass window, casting alternating light and shadow across her face. She looked at the man who had once been her husband, but had given her 3 years of cold marriage and ruthless abandonment, watching the nearly insane possessiveness that lineage now brought out in him. She smiled. Her smile was beautiful, yet icy cold. "Marcus." She called his name, her voice clear and resonant. "From the moment you handed me the divorce papers for her sake, you, and your progeny, ceased to matter to me." With that, she no longer looked at his instantly frozen expression. She linked her arm with Ethan's, straightened her back, and, amidst the deafening silence and countless stunned, sympathetic, scornful, and amused stares, she calmly and unhurriedly walked out of the wedding venue, which was destined to become the laughingstock of the entire city. She left the chaos, embarrassment, and the utterly disgraced bride and groom completely behind. The wedding day farce spread throughout high society at lightning speed, quickly topping the trending topics on social media. Hashtag Marcus Vance wedding crashed by pregnant ex, hashtag twins, hashtag Grace Vance queen of composure, hashtag Tiffany the tragic first love. Outlandish headlines and discussions went viral. OMG. A story straight out of a novel. Ex-wife returned pregnant and shut down the wedding. A protagonist out of a revenge fantasy, for sure. Marcus the scumbag deserves it. Abandoned his wife for the one that got away, only for the wife to be carrying twins, LOL. The one that got away must have been fuming. Am I the only one who thinks Grace is utterly badass? That line, "You and your progeny cease to matter to me," was everything. What's up with Ethan? How is he with Grace? And so protective of her? So much drama in high society. But so entertaining. Bring on the drama. Let the fireworks begin. Willow Estate, master bedroom. Grace turned off the noisy comments on her tablet and rubbed her temples. Her body felt a bit tired, but her mind was unusually calm. Regrets? Ethan walked in, holding a glass of warm milk, and offered it to her. Grace took the milk and shook her head. No, she paused, then added, "I just didn't expect it to become public in such a way." Ethan sat beside her, his long arm casually draped over the back of the sofa. The outcome was better than expected, wasn't it? He raised an eyebrow. Vance stock plummeted at opening today. Marcus is in a bind. And his parents are driving him crazy. After all, the only Vance grandchildren, and twins at that, were out there. Grace took a sip of milk, the warm liquid sliding down her throat, bringing a sense of comfort to her stomach. They won't give up easily. Especially. His words, "You have to stay," weren't just empty threats. Scared? Ethan turned to look at her, his eyes deep and knowing. Grace met his gaze. "Scared," she repeated softly, a cold curve forming on her lips. "I'm just thinking about what to do next." Being passively attacked had never been her style. Since she had revealed her hand and overturned the card table, she might as well play a bigger game. Ethan watched the flickering light in her eyes, a calm yet fierce fighting spirit that burst forth after being pushed to the brink. He chuckled softly. "It seems you've already figured out how to wield this knife." Grace set down the milk glass, her fingers unconsciously stroking her lower abdomen. The 2 unexpected lives growing there had become the most unforeseen weapon in her hands. "The family values their bloodline, especially male heirs," she said slowly. "What if I accidentally let it slip that my mood might affect the health of the fetuses, or even that I might not want to keep them?" Ethan's eyes flashed, and he immediately understood her intent. A psychological attack. She was using the Vance family's desire for their bloodline to exert pressure in reverse. Mr. and Mrs. Marcus, especially Mrs. Marcus, had barely concealed their ecstasy and longing upon learning she was pregnant with twins. If they were made to feel that their precious grandchildren might be in danger, or even disappear, what would they do? They would spare no effort to stabilize her, to placate her. And that pressure and anger would be precisely transferred to the culprits, Marcus and Tiffany. Chaos often begins from within. What do you need me to do? Ethan asked, his tone betraying his undisguised support and indulge. NCE. Grace looked at him. Help me leak some information. For example, that I'm distraught after the wedding, my pregnancy is unstable, and I need absolute rest, declining all visitors. Especially, anyone from the Vance family. Especially. She wanted him to see, but not touch, to be desperate and frustrated, yet helpless. And to bear the full brunt of the family's internal pressure. Ethan nodded. Minor detail. He took out his phone, ready to instruct his assistant. Grace suddenly remembered something and asked, that doctor. The doctor who had appeared just in time at the wedding had played his part too convincingly, his timing too perfect. Ethan paused, then looked up at her, a knowing smile playing on his lips. You mean Dr. Anderson? He is indeed an expert in obstetrics and gynecology. It just so happens his son works for a company under my group and has been performing exceptionally well. He's about to be promoted. Grace instantly understood. So that was it. Not a coincidence, but a setup. From the moment she decided to come to the wedding, or rather, from the moment Ethan agreed to bring her, the script for this play had already been written. She had merely made her entrance as planned, while Ethan had arranged all the surprises, including that earth-shattering revelation. She looked at the cunning, ruthless man before her, realizing for the first time, with such clarity, that choosing to collaborate with him was like playing with fire. But, she touched her lower abdomen. She now needed this tiger's fangs and claws to carve a path forward for herself and her children. Thank you, she said softly. Ethan put away his phone and leaned closer to her, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek, the gesture carrying a hint of intimate flirtation. You're welcome, my partner. His breath ghosted over her ear, his voice low and seductive. After all, making your ex-husband miserable is one of my greatest pleasures. And our next goal. His gaze fell on her still flat lower abdomen, his eyes deep and knowing, is to make him, and everyone he cares about, pay 100-fold for their past choices. The atmosphere in the Vance was suffocating. Fragments of precious antique vases were scattered across the floor, evidence of a fierce argument that had just erupted. Marcus stood in the center of the study, his hair disheveled, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone, his eyes bloodshot. Mr. Marcus, his father, sat in the grand armchair, his face ashen, his chest heaving violently. Mrs. Marcus, his mother, wiped away tears, sobbing. Those are your children. Our family's grandchildren. And 2 of them. How could you let Grace take them away? And let Ethan, that opportunistic snake, snatch them up? Now the whole city is laughing at the Vance family. Our stock has plummeted like this, and our partners are all calling to inquire. You absolute disgrace. Marcus impatiently ran a hand through his hair. I'll bring her back. Bring her back? How? Mr. Marcus slammed his hand on the mahogany desk. Ethan has her hidden in Willow Estate, guarded like a fortress. Our people can't even get past the main gate. And, Mrs. Marcus remembered something even worse. The doctor said Grace was distraught, her pregnancy unstable, and she needs absolute rest. If anything happens to my 2 grandchildren, I'll never forgive you. Distraught. Of course, from the spectacle at the wedding. And the instigator of that spectacle. Mrs. Marcus's gaze swept resentfully towards the closed guest room door on the 2nd floor. Tiffany was temporarily settled there. This woman, once her somewhat satisfactory choice for a daughter-in-law, had now become the culprit who might cause her to lose her 2 precious grandchildren. If only she hadn't been in such a rush to get married, none of this would have happened. Marcus also thought of Tiffany, a wave of irritation sweeping over him. Tiffany was innocent, she imply loved him too much. But the children, they were his bloodline, twins. He had to get them back. Dad, Mom, please don't worry. Marcus took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. I'll handle the children's matter. Grace and I were married for 3 years, she's just angry for now. I'll make her change her mind. The most pressing task was to see Grace. He took out his phone and tried dialing the familiar number again. This time, the call actually went through. Marcus's heart leaped with joy, and he quickly spoke. Grace. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end, then Grace's calm, level voice came through. Mr. Marcus, is there something you need? The detached Mr. Marcus pierced Marcus's heart like a needle. He softened his tone. Grace, let's talk. About the children are fine. No need for Mr. Marcus to concern yourself. They're my children. Marcus couldn't help but raise his voice. Grace, you must let me see them. What are your terms? Name them. Terms? Grace seemed to let out a soft laugh on the other end of the phone. Mr. Marcus, have you forgotten you're currently a married man? To ask your ex-wife for terms, your Ms. Tiffany wouldn't be pleased. Marcus choked. The wedding wasn't completed. Legally, she and I are not yet married. The words escaped his lips before he even realized it, startling even himself. Grace on the other end of the line fell silent too. After a moment, her voice came through again, tinged with a clear fatigue and weakness. Marcus, I'm very tired right now. I don't want to discuss this. Her breathing seemed a little shallow. The doctor said I need rest and shouldn't be subjected to any stress. Your call is making me very uncomfortable. With that, before Marcus could react, the call was abruptly disconnected. Grace! Grace! Marcus yelled into the dial tone, his face darkening considerably. Unwell. Unstable pregnancy. These words circled in his mind like a curse. What did she say? Mrs. Marcus asked anxiously. Marcus irritably loosened his tie. She hung up. She said. She felt unwell. What? Mrs. Marcus shrieked, nearly fainting. See? I told you. It's all your fault. And that Tiffany. If anything happens to my precious grandchildren, I'll make your lives hell. Mr. Marcus also shot to his feet, pointing a finger at Marcus's nose. I don't care what you have to do. Apologize, beg, even get down on your knees. You must get Grace's forgiveness. You must ensure she and the children are safe and sound. Otherwise, you can forget about your CEO position. Marcus reeled under the dual pressure from his parents, thinking of Grace's cold, distant attitude and the potentially precarious pregnancy, and then of Tiffany, left in the guest room in an awkward situation. He felt a surge of uncontrollable fury raging in his chest, with nowhere to release it. He slammed his fist against the nearby display cabinet. The cabinet wobbled, and a porcelain vase tumbled down, shattering into pieces with a crash, just like his own shattered life at that moment. Meanwhile, on the terrace of Willow Estate, Grace put down her phone, gazing at the picturesque scenery in the distance, slowly finishing the last sip of milk in her cup. Her complexion was rosy, her breathing steady, there wasn't a hint of unwell. Ethan approached with a throw blanket and gently draped it over her shoulders. Good acting. Grace pulled the blanket tighter, basking in the warmth of the sun. He's too impatient. Haste breeds chaos. Ethan sat down in the wicker chair beside her. Several old shareholders of Vance have already started contacting me. They are very displeased with Marcus's recent string of blunders. Especially after this scandal, which severely damaged the company's reputation and stock price. Grace wasn't surprised. Kicking a man when he's down, and Marcus was the one who knocked his own wall down. What about Tiffany? She asked. Ethan sneered. She's essentially under house arrest in a guest room at Vance. Mrs. Marcus now sees her as a thorn in her side. Several fashion resources and endorsements she got through Marcus have already fallen through. A fallen queen is less than a commoner. And she was never truly a queen to begin with. Grace nodded. All of this was progressing as she had expected. But it wasn't enough. Marcus was in a bind, but not yet utterly broken or heartbroken. She needed to add more fuel to the fire. A fire that would burn him, along with everything he cherished, to ashes. She lowered her gaze, looking at her still flat abdomen, her eyes slowly turning cold and resolute. Just a little longer, babies. Mommy will clear all obstacles for you. And make those who hurt us. Pay a price they could never imagine. 1 month later. The public outcry surrounding the Vance family not only failed to subside but intensified as Vance stock continued to plummet and several key partnership projects were successively snatched by Hawkins. Marcus was besieged by problems, both internally and externally. At the company, shareholders grumbled and continuously applied pressure. At home, his parents relentlessly urged him to humble himself before Grace and bring her and the children back. And, whom he had temporarily settled in a private villa, grew increasingly anxious and unreasonable due to her awkward status and loss of all resources. She started calling Marcus frequently, crying, questioning, and even suspecting that he and Grace had rekindled their old flame. Marcus was utterly exhausted. He realized for the first time that the gentle and understanding one that got away from his memories also had such a hysterical side. In contrast, his ex-wife, whom he had discarded like an old shoe, remained terrifyingly calm. He used every means at his disposal, even bribing a housekeeper at Willow Estate at great cost, yet he still couldn't get close to Grace. Ethan had protected her too well. He could only piece together fragment updates from the housekeeper's occasional, vague messages. For example, she seemed to have suffered from severe morning sickness and lost some weight. For example, Ethan treated her exceptionally well, almost granting her every wish. Every piece of information stabbed Marcus's heart like a poison thorn. That was his woman, carrying his children. Yet she was with his arch-rival. This impotent rage and humiliation were almost driving him mad. That day, Marcus finally found an opportunity. Ethan had to travel overseas personally for an important international project, needing to be away for at least 3 days. This was a golden opportunity. Marcus immediately meticulously planned a chance encounter. He discovered that Grace regularly went to a very private clinic for her prenatal checkups. The day after Ethan left was her scheduled appointment. Indeed, he successfully intercepted Grace outside the VIP entrance of the hospital. She was wearing a loose maternity dress, with a beige trench coat over it. After a month, her complexion looked remarkably well, even rosier than before. Her figure remained slender, but her abdomen already showed a noticeable curve. There, his 2 children were growing. A warmth surged through Marcus's heart, and he stepped forward almost impatiently, his tone carrying an eagerness and an appeasing note that he himself hadn't noticed. Grace. Grace was accompanied only by a female assistant and a bodyguard. She didn't seem surprised, merely pausing her steps and looking at him with a detached expression. "Mr. Marcus, can I help you?" That distant address again. Marcus suppressed his anger, trying to make his expression appear sincere. "Grace, let's talk. I was wrong about what happened before, and I apologize. But the children are innocent, they need a father, they need a complete family." Grace gently stroked her abdomen, as if soothing the babies who might be feeling a little unsettled by the stranger. Her movements were tender, but her gaze remained cool and clear. "A complete family?" she echoed, looking up at him with a faint hint of mockery in her eyes. "Are you referring, Mr. Marcus, to a family with a father who has a record of abandoning his wife at his wedding to marry the one that got away, and a stepmother who interfered in another's marriage?" Marcus's face went pale. "Tiffany and I never officially registered our marriage. Legally, I'm still single," he quickly explained. "As long as you're willing to come back, I'll completely cut ties with her immediately. The position of Mrs. Marcus will always be yours." For the sake of the children, he could give up anything, including. Grace looked at his eagerness to distance himself and found it incredibly ironic. Was this his true love that he always spoke of? It crumbled so easily in the face of self-interest and bloodline. "It's too late, Marcus." She slowly shook her head. "It's not too late. As long as you're willing to come back, nothing is too late." Marcus stepped forward, trying to grab her hand. "I'll compensate you, give you and the children the best of everything in the world. I can give you 10 times what Ethan can offer." Grace took a step back, avoiding his touch. The bodyguard immediately stepped forward, separating Marcus from her. "Mr. Marcus, please maintain your composure." Marcus looked at Grace's chilling indifference, pushing him away, and at her posture, protected by the bodyguard. A powerful sense of frustration and resentment surged within him. He stared at her, his gaze gradually turning sinister. "Grace, don't push me." He lowered his voice, laced with a threat. "These 2 children carry the Vance family blood. If I want to, I have 1,000 ways to secure custody. Then, you'll get nothing. If persuasion fails, force will follow." He refused to believe he couldn't defeat a woman who had lost her backing. At his words, Grace suddenly laughed. The smile was exquisitely beautiful, yet utterly cold, raying a knowing comprehension and a touch of pity. "Marcus, where do you get the confidence to think that these 2 children?" She paused, then asked, word by word, clearly. "Are definitely yours?" Boom. It was like a bolt from the blue, a thunderclap striking him. Marcus froze instantly, his pupils constricting to pinpricks, his mind utterly blank, almost unable to think. Not his? How could they not be his? The timing was right. She had only been with him before. But that night. He was drunk. Many details were indeed hazy. Could it be? An even more absurd, more terrifying thought, one that could ruin him completely, slithered into his mind like a venomous snake. His face instantly turned ashen, his lips trembling. He looked at Grace's calm, unwavering gaze, which even held a hint of mockery, and at her noticeably bulging abdomen. A cold chill shot from his feet through his entire body, freezing him solid. Grace savored the collapse of his expression, as if watching a magnificent play. She didn't say another word. She simply gently stroked her abdomen, feeling the powerful kicks of the 2 small lives within. Then, escorted by her bodyguard and assistant, she turned and calmly walked away, leaving alone, like a puppet whose strings had been cut, standing rigid in the empty VIP entrance. The crushing words echoed repeatedly in his ears. Where do you get the confidence to think that these two children are definitely yours? Yes. Where did he get that confidence? If the children weren't his, whose were they? Ethan's? Had they already? Those children. His great hope, for whom he had clashed with his parents and abandoned Tiffany, the future hope of the Vance family. Could it be that, from beginning to end, it was all just a joke? A malicious and cruel deception orchestrated by Grace and Ethan, together, just for him? Ah! Marcus suddenly clutched his head, letting out a desperate, caged roar. He utterly collapsed.